What if the love of your life was the same man who destroyed the trust between you and your own sister? The kitchen clock read 9:43 p.m. Dinner was slowly cooling, exuding a scent of garlic and basil that had no one left to console. Helena ran her finger along the edge of the plate, tracing a semicircle in the warm grease, a small gesture of someone trying to understand the silence of a house that had suddenly lost its voice. The refrigerator hummed. The wind rustled the curtain. The world seemed to go on, except for her heart. Her cell phone lit up on the table. A notification. Helena hesitated for a second, as if sensing the abyss. She unlocked it. "I can't lie to her anymore, love. We need to tell her." The message had Paula's name at the top. Her sister, the girl she raised as her daughter after her parents passed away. The recipient wasn't her. It was Eduardo, her husband. The floor gave way with a silent sigh. For a few seconds, Helena only heard her own heart, an uneven drum beating in the dark. The smell of dinner soured in her mouth. Cold sweat clung to the back of her neck. The phone screen trembled between her fingers, as if the device itself wanted to escape. The conversation played. She saw old laughs, small promises, cropped photos of the everyday life she thought was only hers. Codes. Agreed-upon schedules. "I miss your perfume." The perfume was Paula's, that sweet bottle that sometimes left a trail in the hallway. Helena took a deep breath. She didn't scream. She didn't break plates. She didn't ask questions of the void. She simply felt the entire weight of the world fall silently upon her shoulders. The table set for three, her, him, chance, was now an altar to a mourning that no one had declared. How could they lie for so long and still look me in the eyes, she thought, touching her wedding ring with her thumb, as if checking if the metal was still metal. The message kept flashing insolently, like a discreet siren. "I need you. Don't give up on me now." Helena turned off the screen. She got up slowly. She took the dinner to the sink, one plate at a time, as if gathering debris after a storm no one heard. She washed her hands, dried them on the dish towel, and stared at her own reflection in the microwave glass. That night, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She only decided that the pain would learn the taste of justice. Helena always believed that true love is recognized in the silence of simple things. She was the kind of woman who made breakfast a declaration of affection. 2 warm slices of bread, a heart-shaped butter, and the quick note stuck to the refrigerator. "Good morning, my love. Take care of yourself." When she met Eduardo 15 years ago, the world still seemed safe. He was the shy engineer who spoke looking at the ground and laughed slowly, as if apologizing for being happy. Helena, a literature professor, saw beauty even in his awkward way of holding words. They began by sharing small dreams, a house with a porch, a dog, a peaceful life, and they achieved them. On the outside, they seemed perfect. Eduardo was stable, gentle, and caring. Helena was attentive, affectionate, and serene. Friends said they complemented each other, and she smiled without knowing that sometimes what seems like completeness is just complacency. Her relationship with Paula, her younger sister, was the kind that drew praise. "You are more than sisters. You are soul and mirror." And they were. Since the death of their parents, Helena had become her guardian. She helped raise her, educate her, and help her graduate. She gave advice, money, comfort, and patience. Paula was everything Helena wasn't: spontaneous, intense, passionate about life. Where Helena thought, Paula felt. Where Helena calculated, Paula risked. And Eduardo liked that. Paula's free spirit, her unrestrained laughter, her carefree sparkle. Helena thought it was normal. She always had. At Sunday lunches, she saw them both laughing at the same jokes. Sometimes they exchanged long glances, the kind born of connection. But she never suspected anything. Not out of naivete, but out of faith. Because love, when pure, doesn't imagine poison. Once, at a birthday party, Helena entered the living room with the cake in her hands and saw the two of them in the kitchen, alone, laughing softly. Paula was fixing her hair. Eduardo was leaning against the sink. When she entered, they quickly moved apart. "What's wrong?" Helena asked, smiling. "What's this secret?" "Nothing," Paula replied, looking away. "Just remembering the time you burned the rice at Christmas." "Oh, sure," Helena laughed, believing her. But that night, as she lay down, a tiny pang lingered in her chest. It didn't last long, but it was there. Helena grew up learning that love and duty could coexist in the same house. She cared for Paula with a mother's zeal. She was the first to attend graduations, the last to emerge from crises. When her sister separated from her first boyfriend, it was Helena who wiped away the tears, saying, "No man deserves your tears, my little one." And Paula, huddled on the sofa, replied in a hoarse voice, "I just wanted someone who would look at me the way Eduardo looks at you." Helena smiled innocently, without realizing what that phrase carried. Paula's love had already begun there, disguised as beautiful envy, as sincere admiration. Eduardo, in turn, was not a villain. At least, not at the beginning. He was the type of man who liked to be admired. Success at work made him feel secure, but at home, he felt time standing still. Helena was always stability. Paula was movement. And desire, sometimes, confuses confession with adventure. The first time it happened was on a long weekend. Helena had traveled with her school for a reading project in rural schools. Paula showed up at home saying she was feeling lonely. Eduardo offered her coffee. It rained for hours, and the sound of the rain was the perfect disguise for their fall. Nobody knew, nobody noticed, and what began as a mistake became an addiction. Helena felt, from time to time, her husband distant. Sometimes she saw him looking at his cell phone and smiling at the screen. She would ask, "What's wrong?" And he would quickly reply, "A message from work." She believed him. She believed him because she loved him. She believed him because she didn't want to destroy what she had built with so much faith. At family dinners, the trio seemed harmonious. Paula helped in the kitchen, Eduardo served wine, Helena told old stories. They laughed, they toasted. The betrayal was a polite shadow that knew when to be silent. One day, a friend casually commented, "Funny, Paula and Eduardo get along so well. They almost seem like siblings." Helena laughed. "They adore each other. It's nice to see a brother-in-law so present." "Well, yes," Helena replied, swallowing a pang of discomfort. Later, alone, she looked at the ceiling and thought, "Do I trust too much?" But she quickly shook her head. "No, that's all in my head. Paula loves me. Eduardo, too." And she slept peacefully, unaware that peace was, at that moment, a pact of silence between two guilty parties. When her parents died, Helena promised before the coffin that she would protect Paula from everything. And she kept her promise. But fate has a kind of subtle irony. Sometimes, what we protect most is what ends up hurting us. Helena was rational. She liked order, certainty. Paula lived in improvisation, changing jobs, hairstyles, moods. Eduardo oscillated between the two, as if trying to balance duty and desire. And nobody dared to break the false balance that sustained that family, until the day that chance, tired of being ignored, decided to act. It was an ordinary Saturday. Helena was preparing lasagna. Eduardo was working on the computer. Paula arrived laughing with flowers in her hands. "To decorate lunch," she said. "Oh, how lovely," Helena replied, smiling. "You always know what brightens the house." Eduardo watched the two of them, his gaze torn between guilt and attachment. The afternoon continued peacefully, but fate was already patiently preparing for the final blow. The next day would be Monday. Dinner at 9:43 p.m. would be served, and Paula's message, sent to the wrong man, would show that love, when it betrays, doesn't scream, it just rots. Helena believed that love was the strongest bond between two people, but the wrong love can become a knife. Mornings at Helena's house had their own sound, the clinking of cups, the sizzle of the frying pan, the soft sound of the folded newspaper. Eduardo liked to wake up early, have coffee in silence, and leave before the traffic. Helena, slower paced, preferred routine, lighting lavender incense, opening the windows, and watching the sun touch the curtains. There was an almost religious peace in that ritual. It was the kind of life she always wanted, predictable, organized, tranquil. But sometimes what we call peace is just the noise of what hasn't yet been discovered. Back then, Helena lived to care. She cared for the house, the students, her husband, and on weekends, her sister. Paula would appear with flowers or with wine, or just with the laughter of someone who never takes life too seriously. Helena always welcomed her with open arms. "You should get a boyfriend, Paula," he would say, laughing. "And lose your freedom?" "I'm fine as I am," her sister would reply, leaning against the counter. Eduardo chuckled softly in the background. Helena liked that sound. I wanted to see the two of them get along. It was the picture of the perfect family. Even the silence in that house seemed comfortable. One morning, Helena noticed a different perfume on Eduardo's shirt. Sweet, intense, a familiar scent. He smelled it a second time, confused. "Is it new?" he asked while folding the clothes. "Huh?" Edward looked up from his phone. "Oh, the perfume? It's from a coworker. I tested it one day." Helena smiled. "Strange. It smells the same as Paula's." He laughed, too lightly. "Then it must be a coincidence." Coincidence. That word echoed all day. But she didn't think about it anymore. She preferred to believe it. The routine continued the same. Helena taught her class, came home, prepared dinner. Eduardo arrived late, tired, saying that work was tough. Paula called almost every night. "Is everything all right, sister?" "Yes, Paula. And you?" "Just tired. The office is crazy." Her tone was normal, but sometimes there were pauses, small hesitations between words, as if something was being measured, weighed, before being said. Helena loved watching the sunset from her living room window. It was the most beautiful moment of the day. The colors spread across the glass, and she thought about how lucky she was to have a simple and good life. One afternoon, she felt her cell phone vibrate. A short message from Paula. "I can't go today, an urgent appointment." Soon after, Edward called. "Honey, I'll be late, last-minute meeting." 2 appointments. The same time. Helena smiled, finding the coincidence amusing, or perhaps just pretending to. He picked up a book and distracted himself, but the pages wouldn't turn. The thoughts spun around, insistently, until she herself convinced herself that jealousy was ugly, that doubting the one you love is the first step to losing love. Then she took a deep breath and let it go. One Saturday morning, she went to the market with Paula. Among the shelves, he noticed his sister choosing the same wine Eduardo liked. "Do you remember this wine?" Helena asked. "It's the one he always asks for." Paula smiled somewhat awkwardly. "Oh, really? I didn't even remember." But the way she put the bottle in the cart was quick, almost defensive. Helena noticed, but pretended not to. You preferred to deceive yourself. That night, while washing the dishes, he heard laughter coming from the living room. Eduardo and Paula were watching a movie. Helena, with her hands in the foam, watched the two reflected in the window pane. They were laughing at some inside joke. She felt out of the picture, as if she were an extra in her own house. But again, I didn't say anything. He just dried his hands and sat down next to them. Eduardo between the two women. Paula held a glass of wine. Helena rested her head on her husband's shoulder, trying to recover what seemed to be slowly slipping away. Once, Helena forgot her cell phone at home. When she returned from work, Eduardo was tense, sitting at the table. "You got a call from Paula," he said. I answered thinking it was urgent. "Was it?" she asked. "No, nothing serious." She hung up quickly, but something in his eyes didn't match his voice. And deep down, Helena felt her stomach churn. That night, he didn't sleep well. He tossed and turned in bed, watching the man he said he loved, who suddenly seemed too distant. "It can't be," he thought. "Paula would never do this to me." And he repeated that phrase so many times that it almost became true. In the following days, the absences grew longer. Eduardo would arrive late, sometimes already showered, smelling of soap that Helena didn't buy. Paula spoke less, but appeared out of nowhere with quick messages. "Is everything all right, sis? Are you happy? Is Edu okay?" Helena answered yes to everything, like someone writing a report. But her body was beginning to silently sicken. Her appetite vanished, her laughter faded, her voice became hoarse during class. The students noticed. "You're different, teacher." She smiled, trying to hide it. "Just tired, my dear." But her tiredness didn't come from her body. It came from her heart, trying to hold together a world that was beginning to crumble. One night, it was raining heavily. Thunder roared, and Helena, alone, went to get her cell phone to call her husband. The connection went straight to voicemail. She tried her sister. Nothing. The rain intensified. She waited. Minutes turned into hours. Edward arrived close to midnight. Dry clothes. A different perfume. He kissed her forehead and went to take a shower. Helena stood in the living room, looking at the door. She almost asked, but the fear of the answer was greater than the courage to ask. The next day, upon opening the closet, she noticed that one of Eduardo's favorite shirts was missing. She found it strange. Later, when visiting Paula, she saw the same shirt hanging on the back of the chair in her room. "Is it your boyfriend's?" she asked, smiling. Paula laughed, a nervous laugh. "Oh, it must have come in the suitcase of clothes you gave me last time." Helena nodded. She didn't want to insist. But, inside her, the silence began to transform into something heavier. One afternoon, while organizing old photos, she found a lost image at the bottom of a drawer. It was a Christmas picture. Her, Eduardo, and Paula, together in the living room, laughing. Helena looked closer. Edward's arm was on her back, but his hand touched her sister's shoulder. A quick touch, almost invisible, but enough to change the interpretation of the scene. She closed the album, put it back, and decided she wasn't going to look for any more evidence, because sometimes discovering hurts more than imagining. In the following days, she avoided Paula, and she began to observe Eduardo with the distance of a spectator. Every gesture, every word, every delay, everything became a clue, and she, without realizing it, was already investigating love. But I still believed, deep down, I believed, it was paranoia. Because that's what love is, forgiving even what hasn't happened yet. That night, she made the usual dinner, table set, candles lit, red wine. Edward arrived with his usual smile. He kissed her forehead and said, "You're the best part of my life." She smiled back, but something in his gaze was distant, and as she cleared the plates, she noticed his cell phone vibrating on the table. A message from Paula. "I can't lie to her anymore, love. We need to tell her." Helena stood still, staring at the screen. The dinner grew cold, and in the silence of that house, love began to die. Without sound, without fanfare, only with the weight of the truth waiting to be read. She thought that distrusting the one you love was a lack of faith, but sometimes blind faith is just disguised fear. The house smelled of jasmine. It was the same scent from the diffuser Helena used every night before dinner. That light perfume made her feel that home was a refuge, not a stage. But that night, the sweet smell seemed nauseating. It was as if the air knew what she still didn't have the courage to say aloud. The clock read 9:43 p.m., the same time as always. The time when her love would crumble for the second time, now beyond repair. Helena was alone in the kitchen. Eduardo had left early, saying he was going to the market to buy wine. Paula hadn't answered the call from the late afternoon. Dinner was ready, risotto, salad, the linen tablecloth she only used on special occasions. She had set the table as if preparing a ritual. Deep down, she knew she needed a beautiful setting to say goodbye, even if she wouldn't admit it to herself yet. Edward's cell phone was on the table. I'd forgotten it when he left. She looked. The device blinked a notification. The same old feeling ran down her spine. Helena took a deep breath. For a few seconds, she fought the impulse, but instinct won over politeness. She picked up the phone, unlocked it. The screen illuminated her face, a cruel portrait of someone about to be ripped from their own story. She scrolled through the messages. There they were, all of them. Love, I can't wait. Does she suspect anything? Yesterday was wonderful. Do you promise you'll tell her? The name at the top, Paula. Helena dropped the phone. It hit the table with a dry, real, irreversible sound. For a moment, everything went silent. The world shrank to fit inside her chest, a chest that felt like it was about to burst. Her hands trembled. Her vision blurred. Her breath became short. She didn't know whether to scream, cry, or laugh. Her body wouldn't obey. Dinner grew cold. The candle melted, and she simply stood there, motionless, her heart raw and her mind trying to stitch together a logic that didn't exist. Edward entered minutes later with the same smile as always and a bottle of wine in his hand. "Hi, love." Helena didn't answer. "What's wrong?" he asked, confused. She just looked at him, slowly, with a gaze that pierced skin, lies, and appearances. a gaze of someone who finally sees what has always been there. Edward placed the bottle on the counter. "Is everything all right?" Helena opened her mouth, but no words came out. He only extended his arm and pointed to the cell phone on the table. The silence that followed was greater than any argument. Eduardo paled. His face betrayed what words were still trying to hide. "Honey, I can explain." Helena laughed. Low, a cold, humorless laugh. "Of course you can. You always can." He took a step forward. She recoiled. Her whole body trembled. "How long has it been?" she finally asked. Edward looked away. "Helena, how long?" The sound of her voice cut through the air like a blade. He hesitated. "Years." Helena felt the world spin. She needed to lean on the chair. "Years," she repeated, laughing desperately. "And here I was, thinking I knew you." Edward tried to approach. "It was a mistake. A mistake?" she interrupted sharply. "A mistake is forgetting your wedding anniversary. It's losing a bill. This," she pointed to her cell phone, "is a choice." He lowered his head, speechless. "And her?" Helena asked. "My sister, the girl I raised, whom I defended, whom I loved like a daughter. She regrets it. If I regretted it, I wouldn't have continued." The silence returned, dense, cutting, cruel. Helena looked at the still untouched dinner, the hardened risotto, the unopened wine, the candle almost at the end. All of that now seemed like a portrait of her own life, beautiful from a distance, rotting up close. "Do you love each other?" she asked, without looking at him. Eduardo hesitated to answer. I don't know." "Then it's worse," she said dryly, "because you destroyed everything for something you couldn't even name." She picked up the dish towel, dried her hands, and with a frightening calm said, "Today I discovered that love doesn't die all at once." She paused. He looked at her. "He rots slowly and stinks when the truth comes out." Edward tried to touch her, but she pushed her arm away. "Don't touch me." "Helena, I swear, it's been over for a long time." "And how long has it been over inside me?" she asked. "Since when do you think you can fix what's rotted?" She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just breathed with difficulty, like someone trying to keep their heart beating amidst the rubble. Eduardo stood still, defeated. The sound of his breathing was a silent plea for mercy, but Helena had nothing left to give. She went to the bedroom, opened the wardrobe, and looked at the life hanging on hangers. His clothes, the shirts lined up, the smells mixed together. She picked one up, brought it to her face, and smelled Paula's perfume, that same sweet smell that now hurt. She put the shirt back, closed the wardrobe, and leaned against the door, sliding to the floor. Her body collapsed. The tears finally came. They weren't screams. They were low, muffled sobs, as if she were apologizing to her own pain for letting it grow so much. "Why, Paula? Why, Eduardo?" The questions echoed, but there was no answer that could contain the magnitude of the disappointment. Love, that sweet and reliable love, was now a dead body in the room, and she, the widow of something that still breathed beside her. Hours later, Eduardo slept on the sofa, overcome by guilt or cowardice. Helena watched. His serene face irritated her. How could someone sleep after killing what united them? She got up slowly, went to the hallway mirror, and stared at her own reflection. The woman in the glass didn't look like her. Swollen eyes, trembling mouth, but there was something new, a silent strength emerging from the cracks. "You will survive," she told herself, "and they will live with what they did." The next morning, the sun came in without asking permission. Eduardo woke up to a set table, hot coffee, fresh bread, a clean house. Helena sat calmly, with her usual serene gaze. He approached, tense. "We need to talk." "Not now," she replied. "Eat first." Edward looked suspicious, but obeyed. He ate in silence while she watched. When she finished, she stood up, collected her plate, and before turning her back said, "I don't know yet if I'll forgive you, but I know I won't beg you to stay." He tried to answer, but she had already left the kitchen. In the bedroom, she opened the window. The cold wind entered, lifting the curtains. Helena took a deep breath. The fresh air seemed to hurt, but also to cleanse. She lay down on the bed, exhausted, and before falling asleep, she thought, "Today I slept next to the man who betrayed me, and dreamed of the woman I will never be again." In the days that followed, Time lost its shape. The hours no longer knew where to begin or end. Helena woke and fell asleep in the same silence. That kind of stillness that seems to weigh more than any scream. The house, once full of life, now smelled of distance. Edward was still there. He slept on the sofa, saying they needed to talk. But his words now had the hollow sound of excuses no one wants to hear. Helena made coffee, left it on the table, and left without looking back. It was her way of existing without begging. The first morning after the discovery was the hardest. Her body wanted to move on, but her mind insisted on returning. Everything ached. Her chest, her bones, even her gestures. The mirror reflected a different woman, pale, tired, with a look that no longer fit on her face. At school, she pretended to be normal. She smiled at the students, taught classes, corrected essays. But, between one line and another, she read her own hidden wounds in the words of others. In a text about trust, a student wrote, "To trust is to give your heart to someone and hope they don't drop it." Helena had to leave the room. She sat in the courtyard, looking at the sky. The blue seemed to mock human pain with its infinite calm. She took a deep breath and promised herself that she wouldn't crumble there, in front of anyone. That night, back home, she found Eduardo at the table. He tried to smile. "I made dinner." She looked at the pots, the folded napkin, the ridiculous attempt at normalcy. "You didn't need to. We need to talk. I've already heard everything I needed to hear." "Helen, I love you." She laughed humorlessly. "Love isn't what you did. Love is not being able to sleep after doing what you did." Eduardo lowered his head without answering. "I was wrong." "No, Edward, you chose." And she left, leaving the steaming plate on the table. In the following days, her body reacted to the pain with the same stubbornness of someone fighting to keep breathing. She lost her appetite. She lost sleep, but she didn't lose control. She calmly washed the dishes. She watered the plants. She answered messages from colleagues as if nothing had happened. It was her way of telling the world, "I still exist, even broken." Sometimes at night, I would hear Eduardo crying softly in the living room. I didn't feel pity. I felt anger. Anger at having loved so much. Anger at having been too good. And yet, I missed him. Because the absence of the one who destroyed her is, for a time, a cruel form of addiction. One morning she received a message from Paula. "Can we talk?" Helena stared at the screen for long seconds. Her heart wanted to answer no, but her mind whispered, "You need to listen." They arranged to meet at a cafe downtown, the same one they used to frequent on Saturdays. Paula arrived hesitantly, her eyes swollen and her hair haphazardly tied up. Helena observed her in silence. "I don't even know where to begin," Paula said, her voice trembling. "Then don't begin, because nothing you say will change what you did," Helena replied coldly. Paula lowered her eyes. "I swear, it wasn't planned. No betrayal is. I fell in love unintentionally. Then you should have fallen out of love out of respect." Her sister began to cry. Helena didn't move. The crying no longer moved her. It was like hearing a distant echo of a life she didn't recognize. "I love you, Lena," Paula whispered. Helena laughed bitterly. "Love? You don't know what love is. Love isn't hidden, doesn't steal, doesn't divide. Love is a choice, Paula, and you chose me last." Paula tried to touch her hand. Helena pulled away. "I forgive you someday, but not today." He stood up and left. He left his sister alone with her own guilt, a kind of punishment more just than any revenge. At home, Eduardo waited with flowers. Helen looked at the bouquet, and he thought, "What irony. The flowers are beautiful, but they're already cut." "I don't know how to live without you," he said. "Learn. I can change. You can do anything except go back to being who I thought you were." He tried to hold her hand. "Helen, give me a chance." She looked at him firmly, without tears, with a serenity that hurt. "I did. Every day I trusted you, and you wasted them all." He turned and went upstairs. He closed the bedroom door calmly. He lay down and took a deep breath. The sound of his heart was the only noise left of everything that had once been love. Weeks turned into months. Eduardo left home. Paula disappeared, and Helena began the slow process of relearning how to exist. He started painting again. He bought new plants. He went to therapy. He spoke little, but when he did, it was truthfully. The therapist asked, "What do you feel when you think about them?" Helena answered, "Nothing." And for the first time, he realized that this was liberating. The pain had ceased to be a wound. It had become a scar, ugly, sensitive, but harmless. One day he met a woman he always saw in the neighborhood at the market. "Helen, my daughter, you disappeared. I needed silence." "Yes, look, silence is good, but life still speaks. Listen to it." Helena smiled. The phrase stuck in his head. Perhaps life really did speak, but she was still learning the language. One night, he decided to open the photo album. He looked at the old pictures, the wedding, the Christmases, the trips. He didn't cry. He just put everything in a box and wrote over it with a thick pen, "Past, do not open." He went to sleep peacefully. For the first time in months, he dreamed of the future, and in it, there was no one but himself. The next day, he woke up with the sun shining through the curtain. He sat up in bed, smiled at the mirror, and said softly, "I survived." And at that moment, he realized he didn't need revenge. Her pain didn't cry out for punishment, it cried out for peace. Peace isn't achieved through shouting, but through distance. Helena didn't seek revenge. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't destroy anyone. She simply stopped suffering. And that, in the end, was the most beautiful revenge of all. In the afternoon, while watering the plants, she felt the wind blow. The same wind that once carried the scent of betrayal now carried the fresh aroma of new rain. She smiled, because she understood that sometimes the universe gives everything back, not as we want, but as we need. On the last page of the diary she started in therapy, she wrote, "I lost a marriage, I lost a sister, but I gained myself. The love I lacked was always here, waiting for me to choose myself." She closed the notebook, and this time, the silence didn't hurt. She vowed never again to let anyone choose what she deserved. Time passed, but the echo of betrayal never completely left the walls of that house. Even after months, Helena could still sometimes smell Paula's perfume or hear the distant sound of Eduardo's laughter echoing through the rooms. But now, what had once been an open wound had become a scar. Ugly perhaps, but firm. And it was on a gray morning, with a cold wind and heavy sky, that fate decided to stitch together the final act of that story. Helena received an unexpected message. "We need to talk. All of us. It's important." The name at the top, Paula. Helena stared at the screen for long seconds. She considered ignoring it, but some silent force, perhaps the desire to end it all once and for all, made her reply, "Here, today, at 6 p.m. The clock showed 5:55 p.m. when she began to set the table. No candles, no dinners, no flowers, just 3 chairs and a bottle of water. The scene of truth is simple, she thought. At 6 p.m. sharp, the gate slammed shut. First, Paula entered, her face weary, her eyes sunken, her hands trembling. Behind her stood Eduardo, older, thinner, his face subdued. They exchanged glances, but Helena's gaze made them lower their heads. She awaited them, seated, her face serene, her posture erect. Her peace, at that moment, was almost intimidating. "Sit down," she said, without raising her voice. They obeyed. For a few seconds, silence filled the space, the kind of silence that weighs more than any shout. "You know why you're here?" Helena began. "I don't want to hear justifications. I want to hear the truth." Edward tried to speak, but she raised her hand. "No, first her." Paula took a deep breath. Her voice came out weak, almost a whisper. "I don't know what to say. I betrayed you. I hurt you. And nothing I say will change that." "Then don't say it to justify yourself. Say it to alleviate what still binds you." Paula looked at her sister, crying. "I fell in love with the wrong man, and I didn't know how to get out in time." Helena remained motionless. "And why did you continue?" "Because he said he would leave you. And I believed him." "You believed him? Or you wanted to believe him?" Helena asked without anger, only with precision. Paula lowered her head. "I wanted to." The sound of a glass landing on the table cut through the silence. Helena turned to Eduardo. "Your turn." He stared at her, his eyes welling up. "I don't know what to say, Helena. I was a coward." You were, she replied firmly. But cowardice is no excuse. I didn't plan any of this. Of course not. No mistake starts planned. But you had time to stop. Eduardo lowered his gaze. I was wrong. You destroyed a home, she said slowly, as if reading a sentence. And the worst part is that you destroyed the love of two women who loved you in different ways. His tears began to rise. Helena didn't move. I never wanted to lose you. Then why did you replace me? She asked. Tell me, Eduardo, what did betrayal give you that my love didn't? He opened his mouth, but there was no answer. It was weakness. It was selfishness, Helena corrected. And the difference between the two is that selfishness is conscious. Paula tried to intervene. Lena, please don't talk like that. Helen glanced at her sideways. I talk like this because I've learned that forgiveness isn't a favor. It's a boundary. Pause. And you all crossed it. Her sister began to sob. I know you'll never love me like you used to. Helena took a deep breath. I love you, Paula, she said, surprising everyone. But it's a love that doesn't need cohabitation. What does that mean? Her sister asked. That I forgive you, but I don't want you around. Tears fell down Paula's face. Helen remained calm. Sometimes that's what love is. Letting go so you don't drown with them. Edward stood up, nervous. I don't accept that it all ends like this. Helena stood slowly, standing in front of him. You don't accept it? She repeated. Edward, you broke up with me a long time ago. I just didn't understand. He ran his hands through his hair, desperate. I still love you. Then learn to love with absence, she said coldly, because I learned to live with yours. His gaze wavered. She took a step forward. I don't hate you, Edward. Her voice was serene but firm. Hate would keep me tied to you. I just want you to understand what you took from me. Pause. It wasn't the marriage. It was the peace. He lowered his head. What do I do now? Live, he replied, and try to be someone who one day deserves someone's forgiveness. Paula stood up and walked over to Helena. Can I hug you? Helena thought for a second. Then she nodded. The hug was quick, restrained, awkward. There was no warmth, but there was farewell. When Paula walked away, Helena said, I don't want the past in my house anymore. She pointed to the door. Both of you get out, and take what's left of it with you. They obeyed. Edward hesitated on the threshold, looked back. And what if one day you want to try again? Helena smiled slightly. Then I won't want to. The door closed. The sound of the latch echoed through the house, firm, liberating. Helena was alone, standing in the middle of the room. The sun was already setting, tinging the floor with gold. The shadows lengthened slowly, and for the first time she felt that the weight of the house had gone away with them. She sat down. She took a deep breath. Her heart, once restless, beat serenely. The silence, that same silence that had once hurt, now sounded like a rest. Hours later, she lit a candle and wrote in her therapy notebook, Today I didn't need to shout to be heard. I spoke calmly, and they understood that they lost something that regret can't buy. She closed the notebook and looked at the ceiling. She smiled, small but sincere. Forgiveness is a room where few deserve to enter, she murmured. And today, I locked the door from the inside. Outside, the wind blew lightly, carrying the scent of rain. The same wind that once carried the perfume of betrayal now carried the clean air of freedom. Helen walked to the window. She looked at the sky, and for the first time in a long time, the horizon didn't hurt. She didn't expel them with hatred. She expelled them with peace, because she understood that the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's moving on, without needing anyone to help you get up. The days that followed were different. No longer heavy, no longer dark, just different. The silence was still there, but it didn't hurt anymore. It was a clean silence, the kind that comes after a house has been swept, after a storm that takes away what needs to go. Helena woke up early, opened the windows, and the sun returned without asking permission. The wind swayed the curtains, and for a moment, she found herself smiling for no reason. It was strange to relearn how to smile, as if her face still didn't quite remember the way. The house seemed bigger, the walls brighter, the air lighter. There was a new kind of beauty in the empty space, perhaps because the emptiness now wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. Helena returned to therapy with a new notebook. On the first page, she wrote, "I survived love and I still believe in it." The therapist smiled. "That's a good start." "It's a new beginning," Helena replied. In the following sessions, she learned to name what she felt. She learned that forgiveness is not forgetting, it's liberation. That loving again is not betrayal of pain, it's respect for one's own life. And that dignity is the kind of love we should maintain even when our hearts want to give up. She stopped wearing her wedding ring, but she didn't keep it. She left it on the shelf, a silent reminder that even the most beautiful love can end. Sometimes she looked at that ring and thought, this isn't failure, it's the end. And the end is also courage. Paula called a few times. Helena answered a few. There was no more anger, only distance. One afternoon, they met by chance at the market. The look was brief, respectful, without guilt or resentment. Helena simply said, "Take care." Paula nodded with tears in her eyes. "You too." And they each went down a different aisle without needing to say anything more. Some loves don't return. Some sisterhoods don't either. But there are bonds that, even broken, leave marks that teach. Edward sent a letter months later. Helena received it but didn't open it. He put it in the drawer and wrote on top of the envelope, "It's no longer my problem. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I finally felt peace. And peace doesn't go with regression." As the months passed, Helena began to rediscover simple pleasures. She started painting again, and this time she only used vibrant colors. She began walking alone in the park, having coffee at the corner bakery, watching movies late into the night without having to share the sofa. She discovered that self-love also provides companionship. The neighbors noticed. "You're different, Helena." "I'm more myself," she replied, smiling. One Saturday, she went to visit the mother of a former student. The woman, wise and soft-spoken, greeted her with a hug. They talked about flowers, time, and new beginnings. Before leaving, the woman said, "Love sometimes breaks to teach us how to heal." Helena agreed. "And when we heal, love returns differently." "It returns," the woman replied. "It returns in the form of peace." That night, Helena lit a candle and opened her diary. She wrote slowly, savoring each word. "I forgive myself for believing too much. I forgive myself for taking so long to leave. And I thank myself for standing when everything told me to fall. I am not the betrayed woman. I am the woman who chose her own freedom." He closed the diary and looked out the window. Outside, the wind blew through the trees, carrying the scent of rain. She took a deep breath. It was the same scent as the night she discovered everything. But now, it had a different meaning. The scent of new life. One morning, he decided to renovate the room. He painted the walls light blue, changed the sheets, rearranged the furniture. While moving the bed, he found, behind it, one of Paula's earrings, forgotten for years. He picked it up carefully, observed it for a moment, and without anger, threw it away. That simple gesture was the closing of a cycle that took time, but finally ended. In the next therapy session, the psychologist asked, "And how do you feel today when you think about them?" Helena smiled serenely. "Gratitude." "Gratitude?" asked the therapist, surprised. "Yes, because they taught me the value of respect, and because without them, I would never have learned to choose myself." Over time, life resumed its rhythm. Helena began writing a book, not about pain, but about rebirth. She called it After Love. It was a mixture of memories, reflections, and poetry. Each page was a step toward healing. In the dedication, she wrote, "To all the women who have learned that forgiveness is not an invitation. It is a boundary." A few months later, she met someone new, a photographer who used to pass by the park in the afternoons. They started talking, without haste, without promises. He was kind, curious, and knew how to listen. But unlike before, Helena didn't see this as salvation. She was already saved. Once, he said, "You seem like someone who has suffered a lot." "I have suffered," she replied, smiling, "but I have survived even more." And her laughter, that time, was light, free. Helena returned home that night and looked in the mirror. She no longer saw the weary woman of months before. She saw a new one, whole, strong, beautiful in her own solitude. Her reflection smiled, and as if closing a book, she whispered, I didn't conquer the pain. I learned to dance with it. As she lay, she thought about everything she had lived through, every tear, every silence, every step up to that point, and she realized that nothing had been in vain. The pain had transformed her, and now, what was once a wound was strength. Helena no longer needed to forgive to move on. She had already moved on. Because forgiveness, she understood, is not a gift we give to those who have hurt us. It's the note we write to escape the prison that resentment has built, and she, finally, was free. The clock read 9:43 p.m., the same time as the betrayal. But this time, there was no flashing cell phone, no tears, no guilt. There was a cup of tea, an open book, and the tranquil sound of the wind. Helena smiled, looking at the clock. Same time, new life, and for the first time, time seemed to be on her side. How many women have forgiven the unforgivable just because they were afraid of being alone? Helena walked slowly, feeling the light weight of someone who had finally learned to walk alone. The wind touched her face like an old caress, and her heart beat calmly, without haste, as if it had found its own rhythm again. She thought about everything she had lived through, the pain that shaped her, the words that don't return, and the promises that died along the way. She thought about Paula, her husband, the nights she cried silently, and for the first time she felt no anger. She felt only gratitude for having survived it all. The solitude, which was once fear, was now shelter. She discovered that being alone is not punishment. It's the space the soul needs to rest after so much noise. Time taught Helena that love doesn't always save. Sometimes love is what destroys so that we can rebuild ourselves in the right way. And that's how she learned to love herself with the same intensity with which she once loved others. She didn't conquer anyone. She didn't destroy anyone. She simply survived. And that, in the end, is the kind of victory no one can take away. The clock read 9:43 p.m., the same time as the betrayal. But now time was no longer a bitter memory. It was simply the sound of a new beginning. Helena took a deep breath and thought, some wounds don't heal with love. They heal with respect. Her forgiveness didn't come from compassion. It came from dignity, because forgiving isn't accepting what destroyed you. It's freeing yourself from the weight that binds you. She smiled to herself as someone who finally understands that the most beautiful love is the one that is born after pain. And that peace, when it arrives, needs no explanation. Then, with a calm voice and a light heart, she left an invisible message for all the women who have ever felt like her. If this story touched you, if you have ever experienced the pain of starting over alone, or if you are learning to choose yourself after being hurt, follow our channel and become part of this community of strong women who transform their scars into courage. Here, every day, we tell real stories of overcoming, forgiveness, and rebirth. Because no woman should have to beg for respect, and together we prove that the most beautiful love is the one that is born from within. And as time passed, she simply kept walking, without haste, without pain, with a peaceful soul, because in the end, silence is also a form of new beginning.